Hello, everyone, and many thanks for joining this stream. And of course, many thanks to all the members of our community that will either join later on or will watch your video after their stream, or will watch short clips that I will make from this stream during their day. Today is 10th of June. Now it's 11 o'clock in the morning, Moscow time, and because there was no questions, or the comments that I can highlight through support platforms, PayPal, Boosty, and the rest. I will start straight away with the news without further delay. So let's go through some news, dear friends. There are a lot of important developments, and I will start with this report from RIA Novosti that overnight, early hours of this morning, according to Russian Defense Ministry's briefing, 102 Ukrainian drones were intercepted by Russian air defense systems on duty over 11 regions. I can give you some more precise information. 46 drones were intercepted over the territory of Bryansk region, 20 drones over the Belgorod region, 9 drones each over the Voronezh region and Crimea, 4 drones each over the Kaluga region and the Tatarstan Autonomous Republic, 3 drones over the Moscow region, 2 drones each over the Leningrad region, Oryol region and the Kursk region, and 1 drone over the Smolensk region. Relatively large-scale attempt of Kiev regime and its NATO backers to strike deep into Russian territory. Vast majority of drones were intercepted based on this report. Meanwhile, obviously, Russian armed forces also conducting long-range precise strikes on enemy, on military and logistical infrastructure of the Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky. And this morning, I did share on my Telegram and Twitter X page some of the images of the aftermath of Russian drone and missile strikes in Kiev and the Kiev region. You can check out videos, by the way, on my Telegram or Twitter X page. Main direction of Russian strike this time was exactly the Kiev region and Kiev itself. Until now, based on reports from a number of sources, local authorities are trying to put out fire in as a result of these strikes in Kiev, for example. And one of the sources reported that one of the buildings that was struck by Russian side was a building that was used by UK at some point. I will add UK's secret services. So maybe there was still some presence of a personnel of British secret services in that building, because this strike was conducted for a reason, right? Although Defense Ministry did not yet provided some specifics about these strikes, and during the day we will probably learn some more about it, and I will share additional information on my Telegram and Twitter X page in the next updates. Also, when it comes to strikes on Kiev-controlled territory and work of local air defense systems, it is highly likely, I think, that one of the targets of Russian strike last night, early hours of this morning, potentially was Patriot air defense systems, some of which potentially was provided to this Nazi regime in Kiev by Israel. And well, Israeli ambassador, for example, Israeli ambassador in Ukraine, Mikhail Brodsky, admitted in an interview, televised interview, that Israel sent the Patriot systems to bolster Ukraine's air defense. When they say, and this is quote, by the way, from his statements, when they say Israel did not help militarily, this is not true, according to Brodsky. And he then went to acknowledge that Patriot air defense systems was sent from Israel, which is very unfortunate, obviously. And it's not just air defense systems, by the way. Israeli secret services are involved in this proxy war against Russia big time, and I think time will come. Time will come for retributions for this criminal activity, for Israel also, and every other enemy of Russia, not just Israel, but every other enemy. And Israel is, of course, enemy, and same goes for US, UK, France, Germany, and they're basically collective West in general. Maybe with the exception of a country or two that are still acts adequately, but unfortunately this is an exception, not the rule. And of course, I'm talking about political, while mentioning enemies, I'm talking about political class and the states. In no circumstances I will ever talk in such a manner in regards to ordinary people from whichever country, by the way. Even if I'm quite sure that vast majority of societies in collectivist countries are zombified by this time with their extreme Russophobia, extreme anti-Russian propaganda of their so-called elites. But still, ordinary people is ordinary people. I consider as enemies of Russia, and enemies of Russians, Western so-called elites, globalists, neocons, and the regimes that they control worldwide, mainly in the collective West. Although there are other countries too that's still controlled by them. And we also received, dear friends, additional information about yesterday's strikes that Russian armed forces conducted on military and logistical infrastructure of the Kiev regime. I reported there that during the yesterday's strikes, one of the main targets was airfield in a Rovno region, which was used by NATO and the Kiev regime to store missiles, according to reports that I see on Russian segment of internet, to store missiles, long-range cruise missiles like British Storm Shadow, French Scalp PG, and potentially, this is not officially confirmed, but potentially maybe even German Taurus missiles. And also, according to reports, number of planes were also deployed in that airfield, and the Kiev regime suffered some significant losses in terms of military equipment, planes, and also significant volume of these missiles that NATO provided for deep strike into Russia were destroyed. So, and if you take into account how powerful this strike was, one may argue that airfield and all the infrastructure, including underground storage facilities, were incinerated. And I have reason to say so, because at some point after main volley of missiles and drones hit the target, after that Russian Air Force launched Kinzhal hypersonic missiles also, in addition, just to make sure that everything that was targeted was destroyed completely. So it was definitely significant success on Russian side. Meanwhile, we have this report that yesterday POW Exchange took place between Moscow and Kiev. The first group of soldiers under 25-year-old was returned from Ukrainian captivity to Russia. First they went to Belarus, and then from Belarus to Russia. And what is information itself is of course positive, and this exchange of POWs was done according to agreements that was reached in Istanbul during the recent second round of direct talks between Moscow and Kiev. But what is also interesting, first time, if I'm not mistaken, information was not provided about number of POWs that was released by each side. Russian media outlets only reported, based on Russian Defense Ministry, that from Russian captivity were freed same number of Ukrainian POWs. And this was just the first stage. Overall, according to, if this process continues according to Istanbul agreements, overall both sides will release at least 1,000 POWs, among them not just military personnel that is under 25 years, but also military personnel in captivity that is ill, seriously ill, in critical condition. So yet again, something positive in terms of humanitarian contacts between the sides. And well, on the topic of exchange of POWs, well, as I reported previously, and many of you, of course, know, dear friends, that for a second week now, Russia is offering Kiev regime to transfer bodies of killed Ukrainian military personnel, 6,000 bodies to be more precise, of their soldiers and their officers that were identified by Russian side. All the DNA tests were conducted and all their information was gathered that is necessary in such cases. And the Kiev regime, as you know, dear friends, and as I predicted, and there are many other commentators, Kiev regime is refusing still until now to accept this their own military personnel, basically, to transfer them to families so that they will bury them based on their traditions, religious traditions, and so on. And Politico come up, and in recent updates, dear friends, I did explain my take why Kiev regime is refusing to accept this transfer. It's a do I have to repeat her? I mean, it's several key points there that needs to be highlighted. For example, first is, of course, that this transfer of 6,000 bodies of killed Ukrainian military personnel will derail big time narrative that was pushed by Kiev regime and its NATO backers that since the beginning of special military operation, they only lost like 40, 50,000 troops. That's the first thing. Secondly, Kiev regime don't want to pay compensations for families of their deceased military personnel, and therefore quite often bodies of killed Ukrainian military personnel is not evacuated from the battlefield, even if Russian side is offering such an opportunity. And in many cases, killed military personnel designated as missing in action or as deserters. So that way, Kiev regime is avoiding paying compensations to their families of this military personnel. Well, Politico, pay attention, surprisingly, I will say, pay attention to these developments and come up with the information that Russian side can, in addition to the 6,000 killed, in addition to bodies of the 6,000 killed military personnel of Kiev regime, can also transfer 40,000 more bodies of Ukrainian soldiers and their officers. And well, Politico, being Western propaganda outlet, is taking its, tries to push its own narrative that this is Russia's attack on Ukraine's economy. They don't see humanitarian aspect of it. I mean, usual stuff there. But, and I don't know how reliable this report of Politico is, but in any case, obviously there is a financial weight also on the Kiev regime if this information is correct and if Russia is really ready and can transfer another 40,000 bodies of the Kiev regime forces, troops, because overall, in that case, Kiev regime, if they accept 6,000 killed, bodies of 6,000 killed military personnel, they have to pay around $2.2, $2.3 billion as a compensations to the families of this military personnel. Then if 40,000 more bodies are transferred to Kiev regime, then this number will go up to 20 billion potentially, if not more. And definitely Zelensky and his criminal associates are not the people that would want to offer any compensation to the families of these people, and neither their Western backers want to do so. This is a big topic, dear friends. This is a big topic, and the Russian side is publishing names of the killed Ukrainian soldiers and the officers that Moscow is ready to transfer to Kiev regime, and their relatives can check these lists. They can look at their relatives that were designated as missing in action or the deserters, and if they find their loved ones, potentially, I'm not sure about, but potentially they might try to reach Russian side, and maybe in terms of humanitarian humanitarian action, Russia will agree to transfer directly to the families these bodies, although officially there was no statement made about it, and it does looks like Kyiv regime has no intention to actually accept this transfer. So let's see how will situation develop in this regards. Moscow might wait another week, let's say, towards the end of this week or maybe even next week, and at some point, probably, Russian militaries, Russian leadership will say, we tried, they refused, so therefore we just have to bury now this military personnel, and that's it. And when it comes to inhuman terrorist Zelensky, well, interesting news is coming from former Prime Minister of Ukraine, Nikolai Azarov, who is predicting that Zelensky will flee Ukraine, and in a short time. This person, Nikolai Azarov, was a Prime Minister of Ukraine, has a lot of contacts inside of Ukraine and outside of Ukraine, through his position and influence at the time and potentially now. So therefore, I think it's worth to pay attention to his statements. So let's go through some details here. So Vladimir Zelensky will resign and leave Ukraine. Former Prime Minister of Ukraine, Nikolai Azarov, has predicted, citing what he describes as a US-backed effort to remove their country's leader, so-called leader. In a post on Telegram on Sunday, Azarov suggested that their decision to remove Zelensky from power has already been made in the US, and that Washington has given their go-ahead for his ouster. He wrote that although the Ukrainian leader has support in Europe, it is unlikely to change anything and will hardly help him. Azarov, who served as a prime minister of Ukraine under ousted President Viktor Yanukovych, predicted that Zelensky would eventually step down, given that his mandate officially expired last year. He would then will be replaced by parliamentary speaker Ruslan Stefanchuk, who would serve as acting president and began shaping a new political landscape in Ukraine. And we have a quote from Azarov: "I don't think Zelensky will remain in Ukraine after this. He will request protection, most likely from special services, but they will not make such sacrifices for him. The option for his future may be dark, let's say." And the question is, if information of Azarov is correct, question is where Zelensky might go, in which direction he might flee. And I said many times before, isn't it, that in my personal opinion, he will flee for Israel, and he will ask protection, a local regime there in Israel, and probably will receive such a protection, because whenever there is a talks about future of Zelensky or his fate, I always remember statements of former Prime Minister of Israel. I cannot remember his name now, but he served quite short time. But at one point he stated that during his talks with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, he received guarantees that Moscow will take no action personally against Zelensky. And because Israeli Prime Minister was that interested in the fate of Zelensky, that gives me a ground to say that probably already there have been some agreements in place, and Israel probably already had promised protection to this war criminal and mass murderer and terrorist, Zelensky. So if he will manage to escape Ukraine alive, which is in question, by the way, which is not the fact, right? Because after recent attacks on the Russian nuclear triad, Moscow may actually designate Kiev regime as a terrorist organization, and in that case, leadership of this terrorist organization can be definitely eliminated, right? Russian military secret services might receive green light to take action against leadership of this terrorist organization, and therefore, I wouldn't be that sure that Zelensky will manage to escape Ukraine alive, but who knows? Who knows? He's not gonna go in Europe. They don't. No one needs him there. They will use him as long as they can, and they're right now in Ukraine, but they don't want him in Europe, and hardly US wants to see Zelensky on their territory, right? So Israel is seems like only option that he might have. Yet again, if he will manage to escape alive. TASS news agency, meanwhile, is reporting that Russian forces liberated over 150 settlements since the beginning of 2025. So much for a so-called stalemate, isn't it? That Western propaganda is talking about day in, day out. 150 settlements, by the way, have been big and small cities and towns and their villages have been liberated by Russian forces just since the beginning of 2025. And more to come, by the way, because Russian armed forces advancing all along the front line, right? And literally on daily basis, we are receiving reports about more and more settlements being liberated. Also, interesting news from RT that Kremlin names reason for new offensive inside Ukraine. I reported, dear friends, several times in previous days that Russian armed forces advancing now in Dnipropetrovsk region also. And even though not that many media outlets in the West pay any attention to these developments, obviously Russian media is interested in a topic, and the press spokesman of the Russian president, Dmitry Peskov, was asked about it, and I give you his response. Russia's recent advance into Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region is a part of the push by Moscow to establish a buffer zone on the front line. This is official position of Kremlin, and understandable one. Russian president stated quite a number of times that due to terrorist activity of the regime, Russia has no option but to create a buffer zone. And I remind you, dear friends, that and process is underway, isn't it? Process is underway. Russian troops are advancing in Sumy region big time, now in the Dnipropetrovsk region, also in the Kharkov region, by the way. Soon Kupiansk, probably in Kharkov region, will be in operational encirclement, and after that it will not take too longer before that city is liberated. And Russian troops are advancing in many directions, right? And I remember a couple of weeks ago, former Russian president and current deputy chairman of the Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, stated that if Kiev regime and its Western backers would not accept Russian terms now for a long and sustainable truce and ceasefire and peace, then this buffer zone might extend to the borders of the Western Ukraine. Something to think about, I guess, right? And I myself also said there so many times, isn't it, that in my personal take, once this conflict will end there, and in the process, Ukraine will definitely face the full-scale disintegration. And I think Western Ukraine eventually will end up under NATO control, because NATO member states like Poland, Hungary, Romania, potentially even Bulgaria and Slovakia will have some claims on the parts of Western Ukraine, while the rest of the territory of this former Soviet republic will be in Russian zone of influence. Number of regions probably will join Russian Federation, if not all of it. But still, there is a little chance, I think, that Kiev and their surrounding couple of regions might remain on the political map as a state in the zone of Russian influence, completely free of their West, right? But yet again, longer this conflict continues, chances that Ukraine as a state will survive is getting closer and closer to the zero. Also, something to take in account. And to continue, dear friends, RIA Novosti is reporting that even though not that many media outlets in the West did pay any attention at all to the Russian advances in the Dnipropetrovsk region, there is an exception, and British Times newspaper actually reported about it, and I give you their take on the situation. So the offensive of the Russian troops in the Dnipropetrovsk region will be a serious blow to Ukraine. British Times is writing. I mean, what a genius these people are. Their entry of the Russian armed forces into this region would be a significant symbolic and strategic blow for Ukraine, publication said. And earlier, as I already said, dear friends, I have reported that fighters of the Sun group of forces of the Russian army reached the western borders of their DPR and continue their offensive inside the Dnipropetrovsk region. I can show you on the map exact area where a border of the Dnipropetrovsk region was breached, and this is this, by the way. South Donetsk sector. From South Donetsk sector, Russian troops entered the Dnipropetrovsk region, and there are preparing ground, I will say, for offensive operations towards Kiev regime's forces in Novopavlovka settlement. And same time, dear friends, if you take a look at the map, this red line is a border with the Dnipropetrovsk region, and you can clearly see that Russian troops in many sectors are right next to it. So soon there will be more and more areas where Russian troops will enter the Dnipropetrovsk region. It's inevitable. I predicted that this will happen, and it did happen, right? So yeah, even though this British media outlet Times didn't demonstrate there any much intellect, at least they acknowledged progress of the Russian armed forces, right? While other media outlets, majority of the media outlets in the West, completely ignore this. But Times did write something, nothing extraordinary, but at least they acknowledge the fact. Hello everyone, I hope you find informative and useful this short clip from main news update, and if so, please click that like button and leave some commentary just about anything. It might help to deal with the algorithm and reach wider audience. And if you like my work in general and want to support to save this media project, you can assist through several ways. You can donate to this project through PayPal platform or Boosty, also with the crypto currencies, or you can subscribe to my Patreon page and page on Boosty, where I have quite a lot of extra content on regular basis. All the links are on this video in description box and in the pinned comment. And of course, many thanks to everyone who already helped and continues to support. Thank you.